when I first started at Attwells, you had a very important conversation with me about how, even though you were the owner, you were going to trust me and allow me to embrace my diversity and think my work is just as important as yours.
Yeah.
And I chose the people to work with me because I think they can do the job, and I think you did that beautifully as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So you
And helped us to regain some of the sort of size that we'd lost through the recession. So yeah, just to try and be positive about tricky times and see opportunity.
Yeah, I don't think many business owners would think I'm losing a lot of money. Let me open a new office.
No, maybe not. No. You don't see it as work. People say, "Oh, you're working all that time," but I was with my friends. I was spending my time. I was just creating a business. It wasn't for me. It wasn't work.
Which speaks to you being passionate about what you want to do.
Yeah.
Imagine if you didn't enjoy law and you spent all those years doing that.
Well, yeah, I guess I missed out on doing a lot of various hobbies that I could have otherwise been doing during those years. But instead it was law. So there we go.
Yeah. Welcome to Legally Attuned Podcast, brought to you by Attwells Solicitors. Today is a very special episode because we're going to be taking it back to the beginning where it all began, and who best to tell the story than our CEO, founder, managing director, senior partner, big boss, Nick Attwell. He's going to be telling us how it all began, what inspired him to start Attwells Solicitors. Nick, you ready?
Yep, ready to go.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. Before Attwells existed, who were you and what led you on this path?
Okay, so I grew up in Felixstowe in Suffolk and went to local high school. And actually one of the other kids from the school was reminding me when we met just a few weeks ago that even at a young age I must have thought that I should be starting a law firm, because he reminded me that myself and a friend of mine, James Jennings at the time, who were in this group of what would be termed the geeks, and we had a teacher who was very inspiring actually. He used to take us after school and teach us some stuff that wasn't in the usual curriculum, and one of the subjects he taught us was law. And myself and James, after this sort of session we'd had on law, went and sat down, and James, who's much more artistic than me, drew a picture effectively of a building, and he named it Jennings and Attwell's Law Firm.
Oh wow!
Darren, who I met recently, just reminded me that even at age about 11, I was clearly visualising that one day I was going to have a law firm. So shout out to James Jennings, who inspired us to get started.
Shout out James.
So I think that was sort of one of the sort of an early memory I've got, and I think sort of the other thing was probably sort of this same teacher who I mentioned before, who sort of first of all sort of introduced me to law at high school, which I never would have done at my high school without him. The other thing that he did for me was that he sort of said he encouraged me to apply to Cambridge University to go to do my degree. I didn't get in. Which was sort of a funny experience, because I remember my dad coming up to me, when I got my letter from Cambridge, and he said it's a very thin letter, and he said, I have to tell you, I've had lots of thin letters in the past, and they're always bad news, and he was absolutely right. But when I opened it was bad news. But actually, what the experience taught me was that I went there, I got interviewed by a number of the professors there, and actually, I felt, it just made me open my eyes. These people aren't just a million miles away. I didn't get in, and actually what I went on to do was, got in and to do my masters at Cambridge afterwards. And so it inspired me to do that, which had I not done that, I wouldn't have gone on, some of the latter parts of my career journey. So, I'm very grateful, I think, to that particular teacher, for sort of helping to sort of inspire me into law at a young age.
I think that shows the importance of starting inspiring younger people at that age. I'm sure he didn't know at the time how much he had done for you, so that's really beautiful to hear. And at what moment you said you had drafted at 11. But at what age in the future did you think this is the time for me to start Attwells?
Yeah, so sort of my journey after that was, because I was fortunate enough to have gone to Cambridge, I then got offers from lots of international law firms for me to do my training there. So I was very lucky, and I went off there to go and to be trained there. And while I was there, I sort of understood that, although I was a good lawyer and although I enjoyed the law, what I was actually more interested in was some conversations that I'd have with, a friend of mine back in Suffolk. And this friend of mine back in Suffolk was 20 years older than me. and I'd sort of helped out him when he'd begun to set his law firm up over the last few years, and he sort of, we used to talk a lot, and a lot of what we talk about would be about the business of a law firm rather than the law itself. And I used to think, you know what, those conversations are really, really interesting. And he was the one actually that sort of said to me, you know, why don't we go into business together? And this was all before Attwells. So why don't we go into business together? So I left my job in the city, came back to Suffolk, we went into business together. And then sort of, you know, moving it forward, you know, after that, you know, the sort of setting up of Attwells for me was somewhat of a sort of, I describe myself as a somewhat reluctant founder, because, you know, I was good friends with this guy. We'd run this business. We had a large business, we had a very successful business in terms of residential conveyancing, which is what we did. And then one day he came to me and sort of said, oh, you know what, I think it's better if you take your part of the business and go and set up on your own. So I found that quite a difficult situation because actually I was still very young. I was probably in my late 20s. I actually didn't want to set up a business on my own, and therefore, you know, but you know, as it turned out, you know, I think he was sort of looking forward as to what, you know, perhaps, you know, my future held, which I couldn't see at that time, and was trying to give me the freedom really to get on and to move to the next step. And so, yeah, I sort of, you know, spoke to my key people around me who are my business partners to this day, and sort of said to them, you know, I've got this opportunity to go and set up, you know, what do you think? Because I didn't want to do it on my own. And they said, yeah, that sounds really exciting. Let's go and do it. So, yeah, I describe myself as a reluctant founder of Attwells, so, you know, somewhat sort of, you know, pushed a little bit into it, but, you know, having got the support then of that group who wanted to make the jump with me, you know, it was fantastic.
It's the importance of community and friendship.
Yeah.
And what did the first version of Attwells look like? I'm guessing we didn't have 4 offices at the beginning.
No. So so the first version of Attwells, we had our one office in Ipswich on the edge of town, which was where we were. We were sort of all open plan. You know, then on day one, we were probably 95% residential conveyancing. We just mainly did that. Did a small bit of commercial work, a little bit of litigation, but that was it. And yeah, I mean, in those days still, you know, we had, you know, huge post bags. Everything was being done by post and letter still, you know, rather than by email. Email was there, but no one was really using it. Everyone was on the phone, very noisy, you know, in terms of, you know, in terms like that. And yeah, that was sort of where it all sort of started, I think.
Yeah. And what was the next step? What made you think I want to expand? I want to make this together?
Yeah, so I sort of, you know, immediately when I opened it in 2007, we were at the sort of top of the property market, and so, you know, having sort of, you know, left reluctantly, you know, and set up Attwells, I then was sort of, you know, riding the crest of a wave because we were also doing a lot of property work, and I was thinking, oh, actually, this is all very easy, you know, we're doing well, you know, it's great, you know, what was I worrying about? And then we had 2008, which was sort of, you know, the financial crash. And you know, and all of a sudden, sort of 40% of our business just disappeared overnight because people couldn't get finance for mortgages and anything like that. And that was very, very tough sort of period to go through. You know, learned a lot of lessons over over that period. You know, and then sort of after that, it's sort of then been a sort of, you know, initially a sort of fairly gradual growth out of that, and then a sort of certain events you know have taken place. They sort of really, you know, enabled us to sort of accelerate on, particularly in the more recent years.
Oh, that's really good to hear. I mean, I think that's a story of like resilience, would you say? Because if you had given up after the crash in 2007, I wouldn't probably be here right now.
No, that's true. That's true. And yeah, I mean, I think, you know, that sort of is me, I suppose. You know, not that, you know, I have huge setbacks in life, but, you know, I'm used to doing it relatively the hard way, and I've had to work hard for it all, and, you know, it hasn't come easy in that sort of sense. And therefore, yeah, you know, I always think, whatever challenge you're set in front of you, whatever difficult time you have, learn the lessons from it. Sure. Don't make it the same mistakes, you know, and, you know, learn from them, and, you know, and just make yourself that little bit wiser the next time around, really, and try and do something positive off the back of these things. So in 2008, when we had the financial crash, one of the things that I did was to open a London office, which sort of, you know, was the last thing that most people would have done in 2008. But, you know, I was talking to my brother-in-law. He had a chain of estate agents, and he was saying, you know, you've got some contacts down in London, you know, I can help you get started down there. And I thought, you know what, that's a good market. Let's get down there, let's get started. Got a team up from Ipswich and said to them, look, are you happy to start in London? They went down there. And that turned out to be a really good decision because the economy accelerated out of London in 2008 far faster and helped us to regain some of the sort of size that we'd lost through the recession. So yeah, just to try and be positive about tricky times and see opportunity.
Yeah, I don't think many business owners would think I'm losing a lot of money. Then we open a new office.
No, maybe not. No. But yeah, there's always opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's trying to identify, at a particular difficult time where the opportunity is, and trying to do something positive to move forward at that time, I think.
Yeah, that's really good to hear, because owning a business is not it's not like a day job. It's like forever and ever. And I'm sure those periods where you were like, I have to give this my all, it was probably really tough at the beginning, but to see that you were able to push through is really inspiring as well.
Yeah, I mean, those early years, as I sort of reflect back on it, I mean, I'd come out of, in London, which had been quite a long hours culture at the big city firms there. I think it's better now, but that was what it was like back then. And, and I'd sort of started my business, that was sort of what I knew. And yeah, I mean, most of the week I was sort of, getting in at 9, I'd finish work at 1 a.m, I'd get back at 9, and I did that 5 days a week, and I'd work Sunday nights. Yeah, I did it for 10 years like that, and that's tough going, and and I'm not. That's not necessarily recommended by any stretch of the imagination, and and it's not what I do now, and and you sort of, and you shape this. But the same thing when you're starting something off, I don't look back at it. It's not work, It's a hobby. It's all encompassing in that way, and I enjoyed every moment of it. And often you need to put a lot into it to get it kick-started in those early years.
I think it's called seed years. I think.
That's right. Yeah.
You don't see it as wasting my time, basically. I'm investing in my future.
And you don't see it as work. People say, "Oh, you're working all that time," but I was with my friends. I was spending my time. I was just creating a business. It wasn't for me. It wasn't work. In that
which speaks to you being passionate about what you want to do.
Yeah.
Imagine if you didn't enjoy law and you spent all those years doing that.
Well, yeah, I guess I missed out on doing a lot of various hobbies that I could have otherwise been doing during those years, but instead it was law, so there we go.
Yeah, and being a part of Goldman Sachs 10KSB program, that's a huge milestone. How did that change things for the firm?
Yeah, that was sort of, I guess, one of those sort of pivotal moments that we had. Yes, to get selected for that program, we were starting to grow quite quickly, and so we got selected for that. It was an opportunity to be with a lot of other like-minded business people. There were sort of no other lawyers there, so it was like lots of other business people who had grown their business quickly. And it was it's the first time I've been with like a large group of people who are all very supportive of one another. They're all in completely different businesses, so it's completely non-competitive in that way. And everyone wants to grow. And what it did was to sort of give me the education behind the practical experience. Because by then I've been either running a business or involved in the running of a business for probably 20 years, but I'd learned it from experience and from what I'd read. And now all of a sudden I was being given a sort of 3-month mini MBA to be taught how to do it and actually to learn it properly. And so that was very, very valuable. And sort of coming out of that, they focus upon the growth of the business. So trying to understand how to grow the business was useful. And the other thing that I took from it was to try to change the way that we ran Attwells as an organisation. So prior to that, I think it was about 2018 that we did that program. So prior to that, we ran Attwells effectively as a partnership, which is how a lot of small and medium-sized law firms run, which is the partners would all get together, they'd sort of decide on what we were doing. Sometimes we'd meet weekly, sometimes we'd meet monthly, sometimes we'd meet quarterly, whatever, we'd try different things. They'd all sort of come up with what they thought were the good ideas. I'd write them all down, and then I'd go off to try to implement them. And the problem with that, and that is how a lot of law firms, operated, and a lot of law firms still do operate. And the problem with that is that those partners, some of the brightest people you'll know, there's some good ideas that come out of that. But equally, they became partners by, first and foremost, because they want to do law. So first of all, you're taking them away from what they actually enjoy doing. Sometimes they didn't really want to be in those conversations. They weren't really interested in that sort of sense. They wanted to be consulted on the big decisions, but they wanted to be left for me to get on with the day to day. And also, of course, what you weren't doing is you weren't talking to the people who were actually implementing them. So you weren't actually talking to the person who was helping with HR or with marketing or with, whatever the different IT. You were actually sort of making a decision without them in the room.
Yeah.
So it became very difficult to implement them. They weren't necessarily the best decisions. The people didn't even necessarily want to be there in the room making the decisions. And so what we did after the Goldman Sachs programme was to basically say, okay, what we'll do is we'll separate the ownership of the law firm from the running of it, which is how a typical company is set up, and that's why we created the board, which is a mixture of those partners who were interested in the running of the business and also people who were core to the functions of the firm who were non-lawyers, and to have them run the business. And I think that been making better decision making, and that's helped us to grow a great deal.
Yeah, I think when people start a business, they have the mentality of I have to do this on my own. No one's there to help me, or this is my business, this is my name on the line. But the importance of teamwork and choosing the right people to build it as well, as shown in Attwells.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and it's a really difficult thing as a founder to actually do, and it takes time to be able to get into that mindset, and some people can't ever do it. It's that sort of, it's your name, it's your sort of baby, it's as close as a man gets to having a baby, I guess, and you care for it so deeply, as much as you do, about your own sort of flesh and blood in that sort of sense, that you want it to succeed, you want it to prosper, and everything else, and therefore, there's a risk of you becoming a control freak, whereby you're wanting to be on everything and involved in everything. And sort of, as time's gone by, I've got better with that. And also you get better people, which is the other side. So you've got people that you can trust more with stuff, and you become more trusting. And I think if those two things come together, that's where it also can grow, because otherwise it can only grow to your time. If you're the stopgap to it all the time, where everything's got to flow through you, then it's inevitable. We'll only be able to move at a certain pace, and that again has helped us to free it up. Was having all these greater people who are involved in the decision making, so that it can move faster, and grow quicker.
Yeah, I think when I first started Attwells, you had a very important conversation with me about how, even though you were the owner, you were going to trust me and allow me to embrace my diversity and think my work is just as important as yours. And I chose the people to work with me because I think they can do the job, and I think you did that beautifully as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So you've built something of a very strong work culture, and you've been very intentional to show people that lawyers can be very personable, and you have a very strong online presence as well. So as your dad, Stephen.
Yes,
and some people might consider this to be unconventional, the way that you promote Attwells and the way you put Attwells in the mind of people. What made you choose that, or was that formed naturally?
Yeah, I think it's sort of I think one, it's about sort of being honest to who you are. I think the danger, and we did this for a lot of years as Attwells, I sort of described them as our teenage years, where for 10 years or so, what we did was we just wanted to be like every other law firm. And I think, you wanted to have, all the departments like every other law firm. You wanted to be in an old building because every other law firm's in an old building. You wanted to wear a suit because every other lawyer wore a suit. And so you wanted to be like everybody else. And I think particularly when we were very young, in what was typically an older person's profession, we felt very much like we should be mimicking. And I think, it's taken really until the more recent years to be able to be sort of, honest with who we are and, and who I am and who, I hope Attwells is a personable, nice place, to be. And we are interested in people. That's why it should hopefully come across like that. And, and why do we want a strong online presence? Because we want people to understand about the law, how to get into the law, if you're interested in getting a job in the law, or if you're someone who needs legal advice, to be able to explain that in simple terms, because in my view, that's how it should be. And therefore, and people spend a lot of time online, so of course you've got to be doing it online, otherwise, you're just missing a huge audience. So for me, they were just like natural things to do, but it took me a long time, I think, to really understand that was who I was, and that was who I wanted Attwells, to be, and so it feels very authentic to me in that sense.
Yeah, I think in marketing we do talk about the technology acceptance model, which is there is going to be pushback when you try to change something from how it is traditionally, and it might take some time for people to embrace that law firms can be on TikTok and can be on YouTube, and just to see the wider reach that Attwells has been able to get and reach, especially younger people who are interested in being in the legal profession and showing them that it's not as scary, is, I think, can be Attwells' legacy. Saying lawyers are personable, lawyers are fun, lawyers are people to, even, I think Nick being a business owner, it was like kind of interesting when I met you the first time, because I was like, I wasn't expecting you to be very funny and very open, but he did have,
Thanks,
yeah, but he did have a really, like, I think back at that, and sometimes when I'm just like, I don't know if I should be here, but I remember those conversations, and yeah, it shows that you do think about the people that you work with.
Yeah.
And looking forward, where do you see Attwells heading? What's the next 5 or 10 years going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think in law, unless you are very niche in terms of the type of work that you provide, the advice that you provide, and we're not, we provide services that lots of other law firms can provide, then you have to scale. So you have to be on a pathway for growth. We want to grow. We want to be, one of the few largest firms in the east of England.
Yeah.
Why do we also want to do it? Because every time you grow a firm, you create huge opportunities for everybody who works within that organisation. Opportunities for new apprentices and everything else. So I'd like us to be one of the largest in sort of the East Anglia region. I'd like us to have a strong London office, as we have now. I'd like us to continue to have a fantastic, relaxed, friendly culture.
Yeah.
Whereby we all know each other, we're all friendly with each other. And I think that's really, really important. I'd like to continue to develop and take forward like the apprenticeship scheme, take it on further and further as far as we can, and create as many opportunities for as many young people as we possibly can, and maybe reach out and do more for people from very difficult backgrounds, to try to actually support them to actually get in and and get some funding and other things to help them on their journey. So I'd like to do a little bit more on that sort of charitable type side, as well. And yeah, I think I've got a lot of energy for it all still. My daughter's joined the firm recently this year, so we have another Attwell. So we lost a senior Attwell who retired earlier this year, but my daughter joined last month, and so I wasn't expecting that. I'm really pleased that she's that that's something that she's wanted to do.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. No. I mean, she very kindly when I did the same induction I do for everyone with her, which was quite weird. It's just my daughter. I was like basically telling her my story again. But actually, she very kindly at the end of it sort of said to me and the other people there. She sort of said, She went into hair and beauty, which was sort of her particular interest, and she went off and did that. And she said, to be honest, I wasn't mature enough to come in to Dad's work at that time. And 2 or 3 years after, she said, now I feel ready.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, one, good on you for being able to say that in front of various people, including myself, which was very sweet. So you then I have another reason now. Where I build it for her too. So it's.
We might get her on just to have a dad and daughter episode.
Maybe.
And what advice would you give to someone who's looking to start their own business, who's looking to build something like you did?
Yeah, I mean, I think be brave. I remember sort of in a different in the context of sort of my educational side. I remember as I said with you earlier, with my dad saying I remember him turning around saying to me, people from our family don't go to Cambridge University. People from our family don't go into law. Those are not helpful comments, and what I think is really important. They're meant from the right place, which is that he'd got so far in his career, and he didn't want disappointment. He didn't want his kids to be disappointed or feel they couldn't achieve it. But for me, it would be the opposite. I think it's like it is limitless. What you can achieve is completely limited. It's only limited by your own mind and your own sort of focus and your own hard work. And you put them all and you sort of create that sort of laser target. You can go and do anything you want to do, and I truly do believe that anybody from any background can do anything. And so it would be bold. Go forward with it. Always keep pushing forward. Have a vision. I think that's really important. It sounds a bit like sort of airy and like up there, but you want somewhere to be able to aim for. It won't look quite like it when you get there or as you're on that journey, but I think if you don't really even know what roughly you want it to look like, it's quite hard. So I think have a rough idea as to what that picture you want it to look like, and then just keep moving forward in that general direction. And look after yourself as well. Like one of the things that I've learned later in life, I think, is also to sort of no one looks after the ultimate leader, say,
Sure.
because everyone needs to be looked after by the leader. So the one thing that you've got to do for yourself is to look after yourself, whether that's mentally or physically, in both ways really, to keep yourself strong, because then you can help look after everyone else as well.
That's true. And people tend to neglect yourself, like you said. Your business is your baby, but you also have to take care of yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think quite often you're sort of the last person that you ever think about,
True.
because you work your way down of making sure everyone's got to get paid, at a certain day, everyone's got to do this, is everyone happy, is everyone else supported?
Yeah.
And sometimes the last person you think about supporting is yourself. And, but what you start to realise, particularly I think as you get a little bit older and the energy isn't quite at the same intense levels, is you've actually got to look after yourself, well, in order to maintain yourself so that you can continue to be.
And how do you look after yourself?
I try to do so. I like to try and keep myself fit. In terms of I play a lot of badminton. I also sort of do a lot of HIIT exercises. So I like to do that. I find like just sort of short HIIT exercises quite good for half an hour. I do that about 3 or 4 times a week. And then I'll also mentally I'll try and find time to just go and take space, take time, try and celebrate little wins that you have along the way, and just try to sometimes just take a little bit of time on things and not just be caught up in the rush of every day.
That's true. I actually do used to wonder, how does Nick relax? How does he take time? Because I can't imagine running 4 offices. I don't think I would sleep. But you do a good job.
Yeah, no, I sleep all right, don't worry. That's important as well.
Very important.
Yeah,
Okay, this is the segment where we ask our audience to ask a question. So Nick, this is the question for the week. Hi Nick, I love your story and the work you've done with Attwells. I'm curious as to what to do in my situation. I'm the founder of a small firm, and a large competitor just offered to buy my business for a huge sum. Selling would make me financially secure, but I would lose the work culture I've built. Some of my teams are pushing me to sell for the money, while others want me to keep the firm independent. Am I wrong for even thinking about selling when it might upset my team?
Okay, good question. I don't think you're wrong to be thinking about selling. I think you've got to try to understand what is your motivations and what's important to you, and be very honest with yourself, about all the different things. So sometimes, I always think like start with like the end in mind. What's the future going to look like, and what do you want that to look like? If you're sort of at a stage whereby perhaps you feel you've done all that you can for the organisation, then perhaps the best thing you could do for the organisation is to move aside and let someone else in, allow greater investment in. If however you're sitting there thinking, well actually I've got plenty more I want to do. I enjoy this for lots of other reasons. Actually, the money is one aspect, but there's another 5 or 6 reasons as to why I want to get up for work each day. Then don't let the money sort of unnecessarily sway you. And I think on the culture point, I think whatever you do, if the culture of your firm is important to you, which it is to me, and then if you even were going to contemplate anything like this, you've got to know that the culture is right, that the person you're talking to, is actually going to deliver or continue to deliver the great culture that you've created, because it's one decision to decide if you wanted to sell. It's another decision of who to, and to ensuring that you maintain the culture of the firm in the future. But understand what's right for you. That's important.
That's really, really good information. Well, Nick, thank you so much for taking us behind the scenes of Attwells. And to everyone listening, welcome back to Legally Attuned Podcast. We did get a rebrand a bit, changed the name, but still the same podcast, still the same people. And if you want to keep listening or want to know about Attwells, please don't forget to share, subscribe, and tell a friend. Thank you. Cheers.